Hey guys, I'm Alex Swolinski.
And I'm Laura Clivens.
And you're listening to Go, a brand new podcast about travel and culture. Our first season will take you to Iceland, one of the most sought-after destinations in the world. Join us as we encounter everything from geysers to a rich Viking history.
What we have here is a typical Viking house, as they were 1,000 years ago.
And much, much more. Today we're going to go across to Iceland and explore one of their really strange delicacies. But before we get to that, Laura, I'm going to ask you, what is the strangest thing you've ever eaten while at home or traveling?
Or at home. Great. That's a good thing to think about. When I'm traveling, I think the grossest thing I ate was this like mealworm thing that I had in Thailand. And it was tasty. It was salty and fried on the outside, but the inside really had a texture that made me feel like I was eating a bug.
Ew.
It was kind of like cornmeal. And and it was an interesting experience. And I felt like I didn't really want to eat more of them.
Well, I don't blame you.
What about you?
So the worst thing that I've ever intentionally eaten was also worms. But the only thing is I don't remember doing it. So the story goes, I was 3 years old in my backyard. My older sister is chopping up worms on like a cutting board or something. And she hands me this worm. And like any 3-year-old, I just put it in my mouth because that's what 3-year-olds do, right? And so that's the worst thing I've ever intentionally eaten. I don't ever plan on doing that again because I'm not really an adventurous eater. But I'm going to have to start getting a little bit more adventurous with this podcast.
Okay. Anyway, so I have compiled a list of interesting things that people eat around the world. And I'm going to ask you if you would like to eat them because it sounds like you are not an adventurous eater, but you need to expand that.
Yes.
How does that sound?
That sounds good. Let's hear it.
Okay, great. Here's the first. It's called Eskimo and it's insect caviar. It might be pronounced like escamole or something. I don't know. It's from Mexico. And it's ant larva. Would you eat it?
No, definitely not. Well, maybe if it's cooked. I mean, I can't imagine eating like a raw moving worm squirming around. That just sounds really gross to me.
Yeah, I feel like the moving is a huge component. I mean, I like to eat everything. I think it really depends, like if it's the situation where I'm in someone's house and they really want and they've made something special for me, I will totally eat it.
Yeah.
But if it's just kind of like a novelty, like in a lot of countries, I feel like they're catering. I feel like they're catering to the tourists. And so they're like, what's the craziest thing that we actually don't really eat? And then it's less interesting to me. Okay. Next one is Rocky Mountain oysters. They come from a country called the United States. Would you eat it? It's bull testicles.
I don't know. Maybe. I mean, I've never eaten testicles before. So this would be a first for me. I really don't know. It depends on how they were prepared and served. Like if a server came up to me with 2 dangling bull testicles, I would not eat it.
All right. That's really gross. And the idea of it hanging from someone's hand implies that it would still be in the sack, which is really disgusting. I'm guessing it's not prepared that way. But I would try it. Okay, so I know you've been to Iceland recently, and I want to hear about the food that you had there because I have no idea what people in Iceland eat.
Yeah, in Iceland they eat a lot of interesting things like boiled sheep's head, a lot of horse meat, and they even eat puffins, those cute birds with those orange beaks. But I didn't eat any of those. I ate something far more infamous, and it's actually where the first part of our story is going to take us to the Hákarl Museum in Iceland.
Okay, well, let's go to Iceland. Tell me all about it. Take me there.
All right, let's go. Right now, I'm in an active farm and museum in Iceland. It's about a 2-hour car ride north of the capital, Reykjavik, and it sits at the base of a mountain right near the water. Iceland is a small island nation with the northernmost capital in the world. Their winters are cold and dark, and their summers are short. So this doesn't really allow farmers much room for error, as you can imagine. At one point in history, a bad crop or season could really cost people their lives. So Icelanders have gotten pretty creative with their food.
The meat is toxic when it's fresh. That's why we do this. My name is Guðjón Hildebrandsson.
Gavildian and his family have been operating this active farm and museum for decades.
This is Bjarnarhöfn Shark Museum.
Bjarnarhöfn?
Bjarnarhöfn.
Bjarnarhöfn?
Bjarnarhöfn.
Sorry. As you can tell, I'm not very good at Icelandic. Anyway, here at the museum, they prepare a food that comes from the Greenland shark, known as hackarl. At least that's how it looks like it sounds when you read it on paper. But I'm definitely pronouncing it wrong.
It's hackarl. Icelandic word for shark is hackarl. So we say kæstur hackarl, which is like fermented shark or cured shark.
Just to give you a little bit of background, this shark meat isn't known for tasting very good. Anthony Bourdain once called it, quote, the single worst, most disgusting, terrible thing, end quote, he's ever eaten. Gordon Ramsay tried it once and he spit it out of his mouth. But not everyone hates it.
Most of our visitors, they like it, but it has a bad reputation.
That doesn't stop thousands of people a year from coming here to taste it for themselves.
We love it too, that people are coming here, tasting it. The fermented shark is one of our oldest traditions in preserving food in Iceland, so we are very proud of it.
Okay, so 1 second. You said that the meat is toxic when they first get it, so then it has to go through a fermentation process or something, right?
Yeah, it can actually kill you if you don't eat it when it's fermented properly.
In the fermentation, the meat it breaks and goes from being toxic and into edible and healthy and actually very, very good.
The reason it's toxic is from the high amount of urea and trimethylamine oxide in the shark's blood. Urea helps the shark retain water, but it's harmful to the shark, so it counters it with trimethylamine oxide, which is another toxin, but the two balance each other out. These two toxins also act as a natural antifreeze because they have a lower freezing point than regular blood. Trimethylamine oxide is poisonous to humans and is known to cause neurological effects that are similar to consuming a lot of alcohol.
This is so interesting to me. So can you tell me what that process actually looks like? Like, how do you ferment shark meat?
Yeah, they cut the meat into these slabs that weigh about 25 pounds or 11 kilos, and they hang them up in a barn for about 4 to 5 months, and then they're just ready to eat.
So they just hang it and it has no added thing and it will ferment on its own?
Yep, the toxins will just break down on its own by the 5-month mark. Icelanders have been fishing for this shark for hundreds of years, but not always for its meat.
Icelanders, they first started fishing the Greenland shark because of his liver. And Icelanders, they used to export the oil from a liver to other countries. So shark liver oil has been was our biggest export product for 1400 till late 1800. So this was a very dangerous job.
Gavildian's father, his grandfather, and his great-grandfather have all been fishermen, and so he's well aware of the risks involved with hunting this shark.
Like usually boys, they started working on the ocean when they were 14. And they stopped working on the ocean when they were maybe 40 or 45, because then their body was just finished. But it was from you started until you stopped, you had 50% life chances of making it till 40 or 45.
Okay, so let me just get this straight. So 14-year-old kids would go out in the winter and they were on this rickety wooden boat. I made up the rickety part, but that's what I'm imagining. It was really cold and they would risk their lives with a 50% chance of surviving so they can get a liver of a shark.
Yeah, I know, right?
Man, it was rough back then. So when did they start thinking, let's eat this toxic meat too?
Well, no one really knows when or how it began, but what they believe now is that there was once this really hungry Icelander scouring for food on the beach. And for months, they just kept walking by this beached Greenland shark. They knew it was poisonous to eat, so they just ignored it for a while. But this person probably got really hungry one day and said, screw it, I gotta eat something. And they ate it. And when they didn't die or get really sick, they told their friends about it, and everyone else started doing the same thing too.
That's amazing. I mean, that's a really cool legend.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so did you eat it?
Yes, I did actually, and I recorded myself doing it.
Nice. All right, let's listen.
So here I am at the Hákarl Museum in Iceland, and out in front of me is this big, long wooden table. To the front of me are two small bowls. One has toothpicks in it, and the other has this hackarl. It looks like cubed, sort of like cheese or tofu or something. And it's kind of squishy to the touch. Okay, I'm gonna grab me a tiny little piece here. Ooh, it smells kind of like a cleaning product, or like a moldy cleaning product. Definitely not something you want to put in your mouth, but I'm gonna do it anyway. Okay, here goes nothing. What? I don't know how to describe this taste. It's really, I was kind of expecting like some really shocking flavor or something that I could like pinpoint it to, but it doesn't taste like anything really I've ever had before. And it's not like surprisingly horrific, which I kind of expected. I only took a small piece, so maybe if I took like a big hunk of it, like a huge bite, like a whole mouthful, maybe I'd have a different opinion on this.
I want to try it. What did it taste like?
I don't know. There's no real solid way to describe this food. You just have to try it for yourself. The worst part about it was that I couldn't get the taste out of my mouth, even after eating that tiny, tiny little piece. Anyway, here's a perspective from Bastian. He's a German visitor I ran into while I was there. So what did you think about the meat?
It was so intensive fish.
Is it the best you've ever had?
No, tune fish are better.
Will you be bringing some home to your family?
For my father, yes.
How did you hear about this place?
I hear this place in the German TV, and all my friends say see the film and say you must go to the high and eat it. Yeah, I did it.
As you can imagine, people are hearing about this food from all over the world. Anyway, there is a lot more to this story than I originally thought, and it's going to take a very different turn. I discovered something that completely changed my perspective on hackarl and the Greenland shark. But we'll get to that later after this short break.
You won't want to miss it.
Hey listeners, if you like this podcast so far and want to show your support, please leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you're getting your podcasts. They are really, really helpful. And don't forget to subscribe to stay updated on our latest episodes. And like us on Facebook at facebook.com/gothepodcast. And follow us on Instagram to see some really cool pictures at instagram.com/gothepodcast. We're also looking for sponsors, so if you're interested in sponsoring our podcast, you can check us out at gothepodcast.com and click on our contact page.
All right, so we are back where we left off. The Greenland shark, it made a big splash in the news.
Yeah, so Laura, as I was wrapping up this episode, I came across this news about the shark that I had to include. So I did some research and got in contact with one of the authors of a recent research paper on the Greenland shark.
Hello, are we on video here? No, we're not on video. How about that?
My name is Dr. Peter Bushnell. I'm a professor of biological sciences at Indiana University, South Bend.
Dr. Bushnell's research takes him out to Greenland pretty frequently.
Greenland is just a beautiful, beautiful place, but it's very kind of hostile. It's very low shrubs and tall mountains diving into very, very deep fjords. There's no infrastructure because it's so mountainous. So you have to take ferries, helicopters, or in the wintertime, you can go with sled dogs.
So they were pretty much in one spot for most of their research, right? Observing the area, and they just kept encountering these sharks over and over again.
We would see these drying racks with strips of Greenland shark, and they put them up there to dry in order to feed their dogs. A lot of the fishermen use long lines to fish for Greenland halibut, and then you'd hear fishermen complain about them because they destroy their long lines.
The locals had a lot of exposure to these sharks, but like Dr. Bushnell said, they were using them for dog food. And the sharks were more of a nuisance than anything else.
The locals wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. They've seen what it does to their dogs, but at one point there was a group of us. Half of us decided we'd eat some and the other half wouldn't, so that at least somebody would be around to get us to the infirmary if, and it really is as bad as they say.
On one particular encounter, Dr. Bushnell learned something about the shark that would change the direction of his research.
We saw a fisherman come in with a Greenland shark in tow, and so we were talking to him, and that's when we learned there was a sort of rumor around that these guys can be really, really old.
But there's a lot more to these sharks besides their age that makes them really interesting.
It's one of sort of two shark species that live in polar waters. It's definitely the largest animal, so they get up to 17, 18 feet long. The largest may weigh up to a ton.
After a little bit of digging into the research archives, they came across another scientist who began researching these sharks years ago.
There was a Danish fishery biologist back in the 30s, 40s, 50s who had been working on looking at the biology of Greenland sharks. The 30 years that he was working, he tagged about 400 Greenland sharks. He actually caught 25 of them again. Some of these animals that have been out 18 years, they only grow half an inch a year on average. That's when you go, whoa, if they're that big and they're growing that slowly, they must be really, really old.
Okay, so before you keep going with the story, they basically know that the shark grows about a half inch a year, and they're finding sharks that are 18 feet long.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of crazy.
Okay, so let's do the math. It sounds like it's like a redwood tree. 17 feet times 12 inches per foot is 204 inches. I just did that in my head. I wasn't thinking about it ahead of time. So this shark grows a half inch a year. This thing could be 408 years old. Is that right?
Our estimate for the largest animal that we got was on the order of 390 years with a range plus minus 120 years. Right, so that basically puts it somewhere on the order of 270 to 500 years old. That's not the biggest one. Those aren't the biggest ones that are in theory out there. That is the biggest one that we caught.
That's amazing. Do you think that's real, that these sharks can live longer than a tortoise?
I don't know, really.
I bet it's a lot harder to study these animals, though, than a tortoise.
Oh, definitely not as easy as a tortoise.
I work on sharks for a living, not just Greenland sharks. And as far as Greenland sharks, the most dangerous thing about them is their skin. Unlike most shark skin, which is like sandpaper, their skin is more like a wood rasp. And so it's extremely rough.
What's a wood rasp?
So a wood rasp is like this big wood file. It's really coarse, it's made of metal, and it's used to kind of like sand down pieces of wood.
Oh, cool. It's like sandpaper, but metal.
Yeah, kind of.
As we work on them, it's really, really cold water, so you have to wear gloves. But with gloves, it's hard to manipulate and do anything. So you take your gloves off invariably. And if you're not paying attention, the shark moves or you run your hand across the surface of the skin, it's like somebody took a wood rasp and just went and lacerated your skin. I mean, it just tears you up.
And even after successfully tagging the sharks, they had to hope the tracking devices would work properly.
We let them go. 2 months later, it goes down to 3,000 feet, and all the tags pop off. Boom, 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 boom. And you go, crap!
These tags can't handle pressure under 3,000 feet. So if a shark goes that deep, the tags have a fail-safe mechanism where they pop off and float to the surface. But if the shark goes underneath the ice cap when the tag pops off, they could lose all of that information.
I think the Greenland sharks give you a real run for your money just because of the conditions. Makes for interesting fishing, because when you set these long lines and go back, your long line may have been moved by an iceberg coming by and just dragging the whole thing away. So you're fighting the elements, you're fighting the icebergs, it's really, really cold. God, I love it.
Another crazy thing about these sharks is that most of them are blind.
But almost all of them have a parasite on each eye. So as these sharks continue to age, these parasites are sort of moving around the surface of the eye, leaving scar tissue. So the older ones are probably blind.
And they move really, really slow.
The most surprising thing that we can't quite figure out, and it sort of stumped a lot of people, is the fact that these animals, sort of based on their physiology, they're very, very slow. They do everything slow. And it takes about 2 or 3 seconds for a muscle contraction to occur. You would do this in a fraction of a second.
So what do these sharks eat? Like they are theoretically, these guys are blind and they move very slow. So are they bottom feeders?
Not exactly. These sharks are surprising hunters.
You find baby seals in their stomach. You find cod. You find all kinds of fairly active fish. So these guys are active predators. How they do it is a little bit of a conundrum because it doesn't look to us like they can swim very fast.
What about humans? Do you find humans? Do you find humans in their stomach?
I don't think they found any humans. Not yet, at least.
Okay, sorry.
Anyway, these sharks can't even reproduce until they're 150 years old.
Basically only been one report of a sexually mature female, and she was 12 feet long. And say, okay, how old is a 12-foot animal? That gets you somewhere around 150 years.
I can't imagine waiting 150 years to get laid.
Yeah.
I can't see.
I can't see. Yeah.
Laura, can you imagine having to wait 150 years until you're sexually mature?
That is a really gross term.
What, sexually mature?
Yeah, that sounds disgusting. And especially because they're sexually mature when they're 150. Damn.
Yeah, that's a really long time. I wouldn't want to be that old and still doing it.
That's so gross. Their skin is like sandpaper. They are slow and blind, and they're huge, and they're really old. It sounds amazing. Any other Greenland shark surprises in addition to their old sexual maturity age?
No, that's it for now.
Okay. So would you still have eaten the shark meat in Iceland if you knew it was born when George Washington was president?
I don't know. Probably yes. I mean, I don't like eating super old things. That's kind of a rule that I have for myself that I think most people should have for themselves. But I did eat the smallest piece I could find, so I don't really feel that bad. I mean, would you try it? Would you eat this if you had the chance, knowing what you know now?
Would I eat a piece of history? I think I would. But the thing is, how are these guys doing as a species?
The Greenland shark is actually listed as near threatened by the World Conservation Union. But their true numbers are going to be impossible to predict. And the meat that they ferment in Iceland comes from bycatch. So that means it's caught as an accident, like when they're caught in a net or caught in a long line. They aren't really hunted for their meat or anything like that. They'll probably be okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of amazing. It's amazing that they are around. They sound like an incredible animal. I'm going to go look up pictures of them.
And our listeners should too, because that is the end of our podcast episode. Iceland has so much more to offer than fermented shark meat. So be sure to tune in to the rest of our podcast series about Iceland.
I'm Laura Clivens.
And I'm Alex Walensky.
Leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts and let us know what you think.
And thanks for listening to Go, the travel podcast. Hey guys, if you're still listening to this podcast, we want to send you a postcard. The first 5 listeners who email us at contact@gothepodcast.com with a mailing address will receive a handwritten postcard from us. Thanks again.